Hello everyone, and thanks for watching my video. Due to popular demand, lots of people have been asking about teleconverters on the 150-600 signal length. Now this is a contemporary one. I sent the spot one back because I kept this because I thought it was just as good. If anyone is interested in the video review that I did, please check it out. I'll put a link in the description box where I compared the Tamron, the Sigma 150-600 contemporary and sport to find out which was the best. Basically for me, I went for the contemporary because it was just as good as the sport, except a bit lighter basically. Although it is important to note that 600mm of sport is a bit sharper. Okay, so the point of this video is to compare this lens using a 1.4 teleconverter and a 2x teleconverter. These are the original ones, not the version 2 or version 3. But in terms of these compared to the version 2, the main difference is going to be weather sealing, maybe slight better optically, only slight. And then the version 3 is going to be better in terms of optical performance, but not that hugely basically. So we're going to get some examples. I've got the 7D on here. So obviously 600mm it equates to 960mm because of the crop 1.6. So we're going to try these teleconverters. Now you guys have asked about the Sigma New Vision Line ones. Now I don't have those to test, but I would have thought the results would be very similar to these teleconverters. You know, generally teleconverters do grade your image a little bit. I personally try to stay away from the 2x teleconverters because they do degrade your quality quite a bit, but I don't have a problem using the 1.4. In fact, that's what I use on my 300 f4 prime lens most of the time, making it 420mm at 5.6. So what will be the effect of a teleconverter on this actual lens? Well, it will change the aperture from 6.3 to 8.3. So basically, the only cameras you will be able to autofocus on will be the 1DX or one of the other 1D bodies, or the 7D Mark II, and obviously the Mark III 5D basically. So those are the cameras that will be able to use autofocus. When you put the 2X on it, you're obviously going to get something like f11, something like that, maybe f13, depending on your camera. So here's the 2X on there, makes it look quite a bit longer, doesn't it? We're getting f10 on there, so basically it's going to be quite a bit smaller than f8 in terms of letting light in. So your shutter speed will drop significantly, and that's the main things that basically these teleconverters will do to your camera. So I think what you guys want to know is quality. How does it affect quality? Personally, I wouldn't use a teleconverter on. What's the point? You've already got a teleconverter built into your crop sensor camera if you're using a crop sensor camera. I think if you're using full frame, you might want to use the 1.4 teleconverter on there. From the reviews I've read, it's information I've sort of sourced from various sources suggests that the image degradation is quite significant using these particular teleconverters, or any teleconverter in general basically. But I'm going to give you some examples. I'll do some more test shots with these teleconverters on. I'll obviously crop into the image a bit for you guys so you can see specifically how it affects your image. And you know, it's up to you to make your mind up really. I'm not here to tell you which is better, but I hope you enjoy. Hello everyone. Right, here is the 150-600 contemporary lens that you can buy off Amazon. £739, quite a cheap lens comparison to the Canon Primes obviously. I just wanted to go through some examples I've taken to give you an idea on the effects of teleconverters on this lens. So let's start off with where this lens is at its best is probably at 500mm. So obviously this is an image at 500mm. Forgive the ISO being 1600, but I want you to get a really fast shutter speed. And if we just give you an idea of what the specs on that was, we're talking around the 1000 to 1500 shutter speed mark. I tried to keep my images all at f10. Unfortunately, when you start putting the 2x teleconverter on, you're going to get f13. So I did at one point start using f13 on the 1.4 teleconverters. Please forgive that in these examples, but hopefully that shouldn't affect you judging the quality of the images. So here we have an image at 500mm. For the purpose of this video, I'm going to zoom in up to 100% so you guys can see the quality. 50%, 100%, 200%. And as you can see, that's the quality you're getting. Obviously you're getting some noise in there, but it is ISO 1600 on a 7D. So that's 500mm. Let's have a look at 600mm. Again, we're zooming in into the moss area here. So that's 50%, 100%, 200%. So hopefully that'll give you an idea on quality. Right, at this point we've got the 1.4 teleconverter on. Readout on the data is 704mm. So if we zoom into the moss, 50%, 100%, 200%. Feel free to pause the video if you want to see the examples, but I'm trying to go through it as quickly as I can. Okay, obviously that picture you just saw is equivalent of 500mm with the 1.4 teleconverter on. This picture here is equivalent of 840mm, so we've gone to 600mm on the lens, and that's just zooming onto the image. For 840mm is the data readout on this. 100%, 200%, and that's the quality with the teleconverter on it. Right, let's move on to the 2x teleconverter. Now this will typically be f13, wide open as much as you can on this particular Sigma lens. We're at 500mm, but because of the crop factor and the 2x teleconverter, sorry about that, please ignore that. Basically this is equivalent to a full frame, these millimeters that I'm giving you. So you will need to basically adjust the figures by 1.6. So on this picture, on full frame, on my 7D, it's giving us a readout of 992mm at the 500mm point on the lens with our 2x teleconverter on. So let's zoom in. 50%, 100%, 200%. Obviously at ISO 1600 we do have a bit of noise in there and grain. It's not bad, but it's not great either. Typically, if I was advising someone, use a crop sensor camera, 1.6 crop, like the 7D Mark II, or the Nikon equivalent, and you should be fine. I personally wouldn't recommend using a teleconverter because obviously it's not the greatest of quality. Right, this is equivalent of 1200mm on full frame. Obviously you times that by 1.6 if you're using it on a crop. So basically you're talking over 2000mm with a crop sensor camera really, which is pretty silly really. But basically that's 1200mm, f13 the 2 times will give you a readout of f13 in terms of the aperture. So let's zoom in. %, 200%. I wouldn't really say it's usable for professional work at that sort of magnification on this particular lens. I know Sigma have their own teleconverters, but even then, I won't recommend it. You know, anyone who's got the Canon 100-400 Mark II might, certainly using the 1.4 teleconverter on that would be certainly fine, but you obviously aperture just drop to f8, so you will need the 7D Mark II or the 1DX or the 5D Mark III to use the autofocus function basically. So yes, this is the examples of the bus stop. I hope you find this helpful. Okay guys, I've got some more examples for you because I wanted to give you a difference of perspective. Obviously this is probably within 3 meters of the lens, quite close up, of this Star Trek model. I like to do this particular test because it gives an idea on the ability of focusing close to the camera. So let's just go through the examples I have here. Right, obviously we all know the Enterprise, the Galaxy class starship here. Right, so this is at 500mm, and if I just bring up the data for you, as you can see there, it's quite low shutter speeds. So we are on a tripod, quite solid tripod, a Manfrotto one, and we're running at f13 at 1600 ISO, generally speaking, across the board, ranging in focal lengths. It's on a 7D, so you will need to obviously add 1.6 crop factor on what you're actually seeing in terms of the pictures. However, I'll go through the millimeters in terms of the metadata that we're getting on the actual images, so that will be equivalent to obviously a full frame camera. Obviously a crop, just times that by 1.6 or 1.5 for Nikon. We're using a Canon camera, by the way. So this is where the lens shines, in my opinion, and it's at its best at 500mm. Sport version of the 150-600 Sigma lens basically does a little bit better at 600mm, but it's not that much of a difference. That was my reason for going for the contemporary over the Sigma Sport. I thought for the weight of the lens I could carry another camera basically. The only problem I see with the lens is its close focusing. On the Sport it's 2.6 meters, and on the contemporary it's 2.8 meters. The Tamron is 2.7. Anyway, back to the images. Right, so this is a Star Trek image. I'm going to zoom in up to 200%. Please feel free to freeze the video if I'm going too fast for you, just so you can have a look at the image, and hopefully this will be a good representation of you know, the quality of what the lens can do with teleconverters on it. So let's zoom in. 50%, 100%. Obviously we're seeing some noise there, but it is at ISO 1600. 200%. I try to focus on this area manually, obviously due to the light being quite poor, so I do apologise if it's slightly off, but it should be dead on as much as I can see. Anyway, the next image is 600mm, so let's zoom in there. 100%, 200%. So there you go. And that's the lens without any teleconverters on. So the next one would have been around the 700mm mark with the 1.4 teleconverter. So let's zoom in. That's 200%, equivalent of 700mm with a 1.4. Again, the 1.4 here. Just to note, the previous image I've just shown you was set at 500mm actually on the lens. This one is set at 600mm, but the data readout will be around 840mm full frame, 1.4 teleconverter. So let's zoom in there. %. Right, next one, 2 times teleconverter. I'm not sure if I got the focusing right on this particular one, which would have been at 500mm on the lens. The data readout is 992mm with a 2 times teleconverter on it. This is the original one that Canon brought out, not the Mark II or the Mark III. Just want to get that straight. But the main difference is negligible between the Mark I and II. The Mark III might be a bit better though. So obviously that's set at 500mm on the lens, and that's the readout. Right, the last one does seem to be slightly better focused. It's possibly that I got a bit better, because when you're dealing with such huge magnifications, just moving the actual ring on the actual lens slightly within, you know, a millimeter basically will change it from being in focus to out focus. It's literally that delicate. Anyway, the readout at 600mm on the lens is 1200mm, obviously, because it's double. But keep in mind, this particular test is on a 7D, so always times it by 1.6 to give you true magnification. So at 33% here, let's zoom in. 50%, 100%, 200%. Obviously we've got ISO 1600 there, but if I'm honest with you, my personal opinion, it's up to you to make your own mind up though. I would recommend not using a teleconverter. If you're going to use anything with this lens, I would recommend basically using a crop sensor camera. I think that is probably the better way to go to keep as much quality as you can, unless you've got the money to afford buying a Canon Prime. Maybe 400 DO or a 500 Prime will probably give you a lot sharper results, but obviously it's something like 6 or 7 times more in terms of price. So I just hope these examples were helpful to you, and thank you. Right guys, so you've seen the samples. I hope you enjoyed this little video. I've done this video for you, so you guys can basically have an idea of how the lens performs with teleconverters. And thanks for